look like a president. He didn't wear a tailored suit or walk with an entourage. He stood alone, quiet, unnoticed. Just another traveler in the terminal. No flashing cameras, no security detail, no red carpet. But he was more than what met the eye. He was Ibrahim Traoré, the President of Burkina Faso. And in a few minutes, the world would be reminded that humility is not weakness, and silence does not mean insignificance. It had been a long trip. Ibrahim had spent the past few days across Europe, deep in high-level meetings, negotiating delicate matters of gold reserves, economic sovereignty, and the vision of a unified Africa. Conversations that could alter the future of his people. But at that moment, none of it mattered more than getting home. Home to Ouagadougou, home to the comfort of familiar skies and the embrace of his countrymen. The Air France flight from Paris would be his bridge back to the soil that grounded him. As he waited near the gate, a cleaning staff member passed by and offered him a warm smile. "Bonjour, ça va?" she said cheerfully. Ibrahim nodded with a quiet sincerity. "Ça va bien." The woman moved on, unaware that she had just greeted the sitting president of a sovereign African nation. But Ibrahim didn't correct her. He didn't want special attention. He never did. Power for him was not a costume to wear. It was a responsibility to carry. He didn't need to announce himself. He preferred to blend in, to travel humbly. No private jets, no grand gestures, just a man moving through life. Soon the boarding call for Ouagadougou rang out through the terminal. Ibrahim gathered his things and walked calmly toward the gate. As he passed through the boarding bridge, his eyes scanned the quiet signs of inequality around him. He noticed how appearances dictated behavior. Well-dressed business travelers were greeted with extra smiles, their suits commanding invisible privileges. Meanwhile, others, those with darker skin, humbler clothes, were processed like cargo, equal in ticket, unequal in treatment. Still, Ibrahim remained unbothered. He was used to it. Unlike other world leaders who demanded entire terminals for themselves, Ibrahim had chosen a different path. His security team stayed discreet. His presence stayed anonymous. For him, standing in line wasn't beneath his dignity. It was a reminder of where he came from. He boarded the aircraft and nodded politely at the flight attendants. No one recognized him. No one offered him anything special. He quietly took his seat in business class, row 2A by the window. He placed his book on his lap, leaned back, and prepared for a restful flight. But in the rear of the cabin, a storm was quietly forming. A tall, sharply dressed Frenchman with an air of entitlement arrived at the gate late, dragging behind him a black carry-on bag that likely cost more than a month's salary for the average worker. He was the CEO of a major energy conglomerate, one that had long operated across African countries. A man used to deals behind closed doors and champagne in private lounges. But today, his expectations hit a wall. The gate agent informed him, apologetically, that business class was full. "What do you mean, full?" he barked. "Do you know who I am?" He wasn't used to being denied. His voice boomed with outrage. "I'm a key player in Africa's development. I'm not sitting in economy. That's not acceptable. I deserve better." Flight attendants scrambled. They whispered among themselves, trying to avoid escalation. The CEO wasn't just upset, he was outraged. Red-faced and breathing heavily, he made it clear he would not sit with the commoners. He expected a solution. He demanded one. That's when Claire, the senior flight attendant, stepped forward. She approached with a composed expression that barely masked her stress. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," she said with practiced diplomacy. "Unfortunately, all the business class seats are taken. We can offer you a seat in economy or help with a refund." The CEO interrupted her. "Refund? You think this is about money? I don't care about the price. I care about respect. I'm a VIP. I do billion-euro deals in your former colonies. I belong in business class." Meanwhile, Ibrahim sat quietly in his seat. the world of political summits and gold-backed currency proposals temporarily replaced by the words of his book. The chaos unfolding a few rows behind him hadn't yet reached his ears, but soon it would come directly to his seat. Claire returned, now visibly unsettled. She looked over the cabin, trying to identify a solution to the CEO problem. Her eyes landed on Ibrahim. She approached him with a tight, professional smile. "Sir," she began, "may I see your boarding pass, please?" Ibrahim, still calm, handed it over without hesitation. She glanced at it. Row 2A? Correct. But something didn't compute. Ibrahim wasn't dressed like the other business class passengers. No designer shoes, no branded briefcase, just a hoodie and a calm presence. Claire hesitated. She looked again. Everything checked out. Yet she walked away, the seed of doubt planted. Moments later, she returned, this time with a firmer tone. "Sir, I'm afraid we'll need to relocate you to economy class. A guest urgently needs this seat. You'll, of course, be compensated." Ibrahim looked up from his book. His expression didn't change. "Why me?" he asked simply. Claire froze for a moment. "No reason, sir. Just a small change." "A guest more important than me?" His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The question hung in the air like a quiet explosion. Claire said nothing. Her smile was forced now, her discomfort visible. She walked away without offering a response. Around them, passengers began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Eyes darted. Murmurs rippled. They could feel something was off. But Ibrahim didn't move. His posture remained the same. Calm, grounded. A mountain in a storm. Claire, now clearly rattled, headed toward the cockpit. When she returned, her actions became more alarming. She began scanning the rest of the business class cabin, and then approached other black passengers, asking them to move as well, always with a strained smile. Always under the guise of adjustments. Ibrahim watched in silence. The pattern was clear. This wasn't about logistics. It wasn't about seating arrangements. It was about perception, about race, about an unspoken hierarchy that assumed a black man in business class must be in the wrong place, unless proven otherwise. His mind sharpened. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was something deeper, something uglier. He had stayed silent out of humility. He had moved quietly out of respect. But now, the dignity of his people, of every African traveler who had ever been judged, questioned, or displaced, was on trial in this metal tube flying at 35,000 feet. And the world was about to learn exactly who Ibrahim Traoré was. This wasn't just about a seat. It wasn't even about comfort or class. It was about something far deeper, something many had learned to live with in silence, but not today. A young man in his 20s, seated a few rows behind, was next. His brows furrowed as the flight attendant Claire hovered over him with that same strained smile. "Sir, I'll need you to move to economy," she said, her tone oddly practiced. He glanced at his boarding pass, then looked up, puzzled. "Why me?" he asked, echoing the very words Ibrahim had spoken not long before. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she plucked the ticket from his hand, bypassing explanation altogether. The young man stood slowly, confusion clouding his expression. That moment, quiet, subtle, unjust, snapped something in Ibrahim. He could no longer watch in silence. "Enough," he said, rising from his seat with calm, deliberate grace. The tone of his voice wasn't loud, but it carried, slicing through the quiet murmur of the cabin. Passengers around him turned. Conversation stilled. The air tightened. "You are making decisions based on skin color, not boarding passes," Ibrahim continued, his voice firm but not angry. "That's discrimination." Claire flushed, her confidence cracked. "Sir, please sit down. Don't cause a scene." But Ibrahim's eyes didn't waver. They locked onto hers, unreadable, unshaken. "Explain why it's me and not anyone else," he said. The cabin was silent now. Even the hum of the engines seemed to fade. Claire looked around, suddenly aware of the weight of every pair of eyes on her. Before she could muster a reply, passengers began whispering, their faces tightening in discomfort. The CEO, who had earlier dismissed the conflict with indifference, was now buckled into his seat. Still oblivious to the storm building, just rose away. As the plane ascended into the clouds, Claire returned to her duties. Her once confident smile was now brittle, a performance barely holding together. Ibrahim remained composed, his demeanor serene. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a spectacle. His very presence was a quiet rebuke, a steady mirror reflecting the injustice around him. But this story wasn't over, not even close. By the time the aircraft began its descent into Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, the atmosphere on board had shifted. A tension hung in the air, thick with unspoken questions and uneasy silence. Passengers looked out the windows as the runway came into view, and then their eyes widened. The tarmac wasn't ordinary. Dozens of black SUVs, military trucks, and armored vehicles lined the arrival zone. Soldiers stood at attention. A red carpet unfurled like a ribbon of command down the center. It wasn't just a welcome, it was a statement. Inside the cabin, whispers started to ripple. "Is this a war zone?" one foreign passenger asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Another leaned closer to the window, then muttered, "No, this is protocol. Someone important is arriving." The CEO, interpreting the military presence as a reception for him, stood up with a smug expression. He straightened his jacket, checked his watch, and adjusted his tie. He had just concluded a series of high-profile business meetings in West Africa. Surely this welcome was for him. Of course it had to be. The plane came to a halt. Then the door opened. Boots echoed. A tall officer stepped into the cabin, dressed in crisp military fatigues, a black beret sitting squarely on his head. His face was unreadable, posture rigid. He walked with purpose, eyes scanning each passenger in silence. Gasps followed him as he moved down the aisle, closer, closer, until he stopped at seat 2A, right beside Ibrahim Traore. The officer raised his hand in a crisp textbook salute. "Mr. President," he said in a clear voice that cut through the stunned silence. "Welcome home." Time stopped. The CEO froze. His smirk dissolved, his lips parted in disbelief. Claire's face drained of all color. The dots connected and a realization hit like a wave. Ibrahim Traoré, the man she had tried to demote to economy, the man dismissed as insignificant, was not just a passenger. He was the president of Burkina Faso. Ibrahim stood, calm as ever. He didn't gloat, he didn't glare. He simply nodded once toward the CEO, acknowledging him the way one might acknowledge a stranger. Brief, cool, dismissive. Then the officer turned. He looked directly at Claire, then at the CEO, his expression like stone. "You will both come with us immediately," he said. "What?" Claire gasped. "Why? What have I done?" The officer's reply was icy. "You have publicly disrespected the head of state on national soil. This is a serious offense." Shock rippled through the cabin. Some passengers covered their mouths. Others stared openly. The plane doors opened fully now, and the deafening sound of cheers from outside poured in. On the tarmac, a massive crowd had gathered. Flags waved. Chants rang out. The people of Burkina Faso had come to welcome their president home. As Ibrahim stepped out onto the stairs, the cheers intensified. The roar of love, loyalty, and unity filled the air. It was not just a welcome, it was a declaration. Their leader was home, and he had not come quietly. Behind him, Claire and the CEO were escorted off the plane in handcuffs. Their confidence shattered, their heads bowed in humiliation. The moment was captured from a dozen angles. Phones recorded, flashes blinked, and 1,000 eyes watched as two once powerful people were led into accountability. And that was just the beginning. Inside the terminal, a small group of reporters waited. Ibrahim stepped up to the podium, not flanked by advisors, not behind layers of security, but alone. He looked out calmly, then spoke, his words sharp as steel wrapped in velvet. "In Burkina Faso," he began, "we do not judge a man by his skin. We do not bow to wealth. We respect dignity, humanity, and our people. This is the new Africa." His words thundered through news outlets within hours. Across social media, the story exploded. Hashtags ignited. #1 I stand with Burkina. #1 Ibrahim Traore. #1 dignity and power. Videos of the plane, the salute, the arrest, everything went viral. The world saw and the world remembered. Back in Burkina Faso, the consequences were swift and public. Claire and the CEO were charged with public insult and discrimination under the nation's legal code. France's embassy attempted diplomatic pressure, but Ibrahim stood firm. No special treatment. Not here, not anymore. He continued his work without fanfare. No press parade, no dramatics, just leadership. But the moment on the plane, it lived on. It became a legend,